Thank you for sharing in this apologetic study. We're continuing the discussion on how science and theology can actually come together and not be at odds with one another. Today, the focus is evolution. I believe it's important to define evolution as we begin this discussion. The truth is, there are actually several different ways to define evolution. When most churched people think of evolution, they think of classical evolution, sometimes called Darwinian evolution. This theory was advanced in the 19th century by Charles Darwin. In general, the theory postulates that all life, all of creation is moving toward or evolving toward a higher state of order through the evolutionary process, which will include chance mutations and what is sometimes called the survival of the fittest. All of creation is moving toward a higher, better, more complex state. The theory of classical evolution is also built on the premise that there is no God, that all life is the result of some chance combination of basic elements culminating in the level or the state of creation that exists today. Now, let me be clear. It is not that theology has a problem with evolution because Darwin postulated that God is not in creation. Theology has a problem with classical evolution because it's just plain bad science. To believe in classical evolution, that all life on Earth evolved from single-celled organism in the last several hundred million years, to believe that all of creation is evolving to a higher state of order, is just bad science. It defies several of the fundamental laws of science. For example, the second law of thermodynamics states that matter and energy will not move to a higher state of order. It will move toward a state of disorder. So to believe in classical evolution that everything is evolving to a higher state of order is to deny one of the basic laws of science. It's akin to denying gravity. Classical evolution is bad science because the teaching states that all life and all matter came from nothing, which again is against one of the basic laws of science. Energy or matter can change, but that the amount of substance in the universe cannot change. And you cannot create something from nothing. And you cannot create life from non-life. Life begets life. And classical evolution is bad science because it has no foundation in the fossil record. In fact, Darwin himself said that if this theory is not proven true in the fossil record, then the theory is false. See, there's a difference between a scientific theory and a scientific fact or proof. Gravity is a scientific fact or proof. Classical evolution is not. It is a theory. And it is rejected by the church, not because Charles Darwin did not believe in God, or because Charles Darwin believed that all of creation came about without the helping hand or the design of God, but because it is simply bad science. It works against several of the most basic laws of science and physics, and it is not supported in the fossil record. Now, in the fossil record, there is evidence of life changing within a species. Animals have become taller or smaller, depending on their environment. But there is no evidence in the fossil record of one animal species morphing or changing into another animal species. Though theologians dismiss the teaching of classical evolution, the church is not hostile to the idea of evolution altogether. If evolution can be defined as progressive change, that God moved in different ways in different ages, that there was a progression to the development or the expanse of the universe and even life on earth, that's fine. In fact, that is in complete sync with the biblical record. In the last segment, we looked at Genesis chapter 1 and we saw how the process for creation matches the scientific record. That first there was nothing, and then there was light, and then there was the expanse in the heavens, maybe the formation of galaxies, and then solar systems. And then as you move toward our solar system, we find the Earth, The biblical record says at first it was formless and void. It was a water planet. That at first there was life in the water, and then there was life on land, and then there was the coming of humanity. And so if you want to equate the phrase, a process for creation, with evolution, that's fine. I think things evolved on Earth. I think the scientific theory that at one point in Earth's history, there was one supercontinent called Pangaea, and then through tectonic activity, the plates separated into the continents that we have today. I think that's fine. That the Bible doesn't speak specifically to that does not indicate that the Bible is in error. Remember that the Bible has a very narrow focus. It is not interested in presenting scientific information. It is interested in presenting spiritual information about our Creator and how we could live in relationship with Him. That's it. And so there is no information in the Bible about the specifics of creation. Information on ice ages or dinosaurs or the distribution of the races or ancient people groups, Neanderthal people, Cro-Magnon people, that is outside the focus of the Bible. And so they're not mentioned. It does not mean that the Bible is in error. It just means that the Bible is not, strictly speaking, a history or scientific book. Let me back up just a little bit and provide additional information regarding why classical evolution or Darwinian evolution is not a plausible theory. Number one, the idea of seeing change or evolution within a particular species, such as humans being taller now than we were 3,000 years ago, that is supported in the archaeological and fossil record. But interphylum development, that is one species morphing into another species, is not supported in the fossil record. This is important because classical evolution teaches that life developed on similar tracks in 6 different phylum systems on the planet Earth: the amphibian system, mammal system, reptile system, etc. And the probability of this happening, for example, for the eye developing by random chance mutation in similar fashion in 6 different phylum sets on the Earth, the probability of duplicating the possible 10 to the 170th power gene sequences for life just once is 100 million billion times 18 to 1. And the probability of this happening 6 times in multiple phylum sets on the Earth is 10 to the 170th. On the other hand, there is evidence to support the biblical position that humans, as we know, is just not possible. And even if it was possible, there is not enough time on planet Earth for that to happen. And the greatest possible age attributed to planet Earth is 4.7 billion years. And it is not possible, even if you go 5 or 10 times that amount of time, even if you go back 50 billion years, it's not enough time for humans to have evolved from one-celled organisms. Assuming that evolution was possible, and that somehow it was possible to duplicate some processes, such as sight, across all 6 phylum sets, and assuming it was possible that there would be no rejected mutation, that every single chance mutation was favorably accepted by the population group. None of that's possible, but assuming that all of it was, it would still take a minimum of 200 trillion generations for humans to have evolved. And the timeline for that far exceeds the lifespan of planet Earth. It is just not possible. Genetic research in the last 20 years have been able to look at DNA, specifically as it relates to females, rewind the clock, and to show all humans have a common ancestor. The Bible calls her Eve. And finally, let me state that classical evolution is not good science because it is not supported in the fossil record. In fact, the fossil record seems to disprove classical evolution. For example, the fossil evidence shows that life appeared immediately after the Earth cooled, and that a variety of life appeared suddenly. That all of a sudden, at a certain point in history, there was a myriad of life. Winged insects, for example, suddenly appeared with a 30-centimeter wide wingspan. Marine reptiles appear in the fossil record as coming with fully developed fins and paddles and a bill. And note this, 100 million years later, at the extinction of that species, it was still the same. And there are examples of living fossils today. Mosquitoes are still mosquitoes. Dragonflies are still dragonflies. Sharks are still sharks. Cichlids are still cichlids. Lungfish are still lungfish. And if the theory of classical evolution was true, all of those species should not be here. They should have evolved into a higher state long, long ago. Okay, so where does this leave us? Classical evolution, Darwinian evolution, is bad science. The thought that all of creation came about through random chance mutations, that's bad science. The statistical probability of all creation happening through spontaneous chance mutations is statistically zero. It's bad science because the timeline doesn't work. There's not enough time on planet Earth for all life as we know it today to have evolved from single-cell organisms, even if that was possible. Classical evolution is bad science because the fossil evidence disproves it. There are no examples in the fossil record of one species morphing or evolving into another species. But the idea of general evolution or progressive evolution is, I think, good science. It does find support in the fossil record and in the geologic record. It is in sync with the biblical record that God created different things at different times. Now, we could argue about exactly when that happened and exactly how old the earth is and exactly how long it took for God to create all that has been created. But I think it is not best for the church to walk that path because the Bible does not speak to that specifically. Again, the Bible is not so much concerned with the when or the how of creation. It is interested in presenting the who of creation. That God is our creator and that we have been created to walk in relationship with Him, period. So in regard to evolution, the church supports the idea of microevolution, that is, small changes within species, an animal becoming taller or smaller in time depending on its environment. But it does not support the idea of macroevolution, one species changing into another species. Now, as we are discussing evolution, I think it's important and fair that we talk about the elephant in the room. I'm talking about the origins of man. Doesn't evolution prove, haven't scientists proved that man was not created as the Bible notes, in the Garden of Eden? But rather, the fossil evidence shows that we evolved from some kind of monkey, who evolved into some kind of ape, who evolved into some kind of bipedal hominid creature 5 to 7 million years ago, who evolved into something 3 or so million years ago called Australopithecus, sometimes called Lucy. In time, this evolved into Australopithecus africanus, which is said to have had a slightly larger cranial capacity, which evolved into Homo erectus, which had a larger cranial capacity, but still we're talking about approximately half of the cranial capacity of modern humans today. In time, there was an evolutionary change to Cro-Magnon man, and then to Neanderthal, and then finally into Homo sapiens, sometimes called Homo sapiens sapiens, which is the current state of human evolution today. Let me say just a few things about this. Number one, there are many questions regarding the reliability of the archaeological research here. For example, the finding of what was called Peking man was held up as a proof for classical evolution. These bones were found in the 1920s. China entered into a state of war in the 1930s, and by the end of World War II, all of the research has been lost, and it is not available for scrutiny today. Java man, another finding from Asia, was put together by the evidence of a femur and a skull cap and 3 molar teeth found within a range of 50 yards of each other. That's bad science. And before his death, The archaeologist who found these remains, his last name is Dubis, he changed his mind and said that it was not, in fact, some kind of proto-human, but it was instead some kind of giant gibbon. Some of the dating is also suspect. For example, recently, the same dating method that was used to date these fossils was used on a live snail, and that live snail was said to have been 7 million years old. Scientists know that there are naturally occurring things that can impact, in a negative way, the dating process. So does that mean that the church should reject all of these findings? I've heard it said that none of these bones are authentic, that all of the skeletal remains that are said to have come from the ancestors of Homo sapiens sapiens, they are either monkeys or that they have been somehow manipulated by the great flood that came in Noah's time. I've heard it said that they were demons or fallen demons, that when Satan was thrown from the heavens along with a third of his angels, that they came and lived on the earth for a time, and those who died on the earth, that's their remains. I don't think the church needs to speak with authority to that, because the Bible doesn't speak to that. As a Christian, I want to speak with authority on the things that are clear in the Scripture. Is it within the realm of possibility that there was some kind of caveman before there was Homo sapiens sapiens? Yes. Is it probable? Yes. Does it destroy my faith? No. Do I have to understand who they were, why they were here? No. But listen, this is what I see. I see so little social and technological change in those life forms, whatever they are. We'll take Homo erectus, that is said to have lived for more than 1 million years. In the beginning, he uses a big rock as a tool, and by the time he dies out, he uses a little rock as a tool. Really, that's about the extent of his technological evolution over 1 million years. And by the way, it's been proven that monkeys today use tools. They will fashion some twigs together to knock down fruit. They will dip sticks into different types of sap and push it down a termite hole and use it as kind of an adapted fishing pole. As they go fishing for the termites, they'll stick it down the hole and pull it out. That a life form has formed some kind of tool is not all that impressive to me. Well, you say the Neanderthal man had cave art. Now, scientists say that these life forms were here more than 100,000 years. Scientists say that they can control fire, that they made some huts. They had spears, perhaps some kind of bow or lance, but that's about it. And it's important to note that scientists say that the cranial capacity of the Neanderthal man exceeds our own. So these large-brained creatures that were here for more than 100,000 years, their advancement was so slight. Their advancement in culture, in technology, was so slight. Now hear me now, because this is important. Now, all scientists agree that about 10,000 years ago, something happened on Earth. Something unprecedented. And all of a sudden, there was some kind of spark in humanity. And instead of taking more than 1 million years to move from using a big rock as a tool to using a small rock as a tool, all of a sudden humanity changed. All of a sudden humanity built cities and domesticated animals and understood agriculture and planted crops and began to understand medicine, created buildings, established trade routes, formed written languages. Something happened. Something happened in round figures about 10,000 years ago. As a Christian, I believe that perhaps that's when God began to do a new work in humanity. Perhaps that's when Genesis chapter 2 begins. When God begins to work in humanity in a new way. When God gives to humanity His breath, which is His Holy Spirit, His presence. When we became made in the image of God, not physically, but spiritually. I think that's where the Bible begins the story of humanity. Because it's at that point that we were brought into special relationship with God. And one of the goals of the Old Testament is to show how God worked through a particular line of people, from Adam to Noah to Abraham, to Moses, to David, to Jesus Christ. For the most part, the Bible follows one particular bloodline, one people group, to show how God moved in their midst through the ages. So as a Christian, when I think about the origins of life, I begin with Adam. Not because he was the first bipedal life form on earth, but because at this point in history, God began to work through humanity in a profoundly different and beautiful way. So can there be a coming together with the archaeological and fossil evidence in the biblical record? Absolutely. Are scientists able to say exactly who or what Lucy was, where she came from? I don't think so. Is the church ever going to be able to speak in scientific terms about the origin of man? No, because the Bible does not present that kind of information. One last time, the Bible is not so much concerned with presenting the how of creation, it's interested in presenting information on the who of creation. The rest we take by faith. And if there are things the Bible doesn't speak to, such as who was Lucy, it does not indicate at all that the Bible is an error. It's just that the Bible has particular focus, and those things, though of interest to me today, are outside the scope of the Bible. There is a convergence of science and theology, as long as we recognize the limits of science and the true focus of the Bible. May God bless you as you give consideration to this message. Our next segment will be a comparative religion study, and we'll look at how Christianity compares with other world religions. And we'll deal with the question, aren't all religions saying the same thing, just using different language? For example, the American Indians use the term Great Spirit. Isn't that the same as the Holy Spirit? Different groups, such as the Mormon Church and the Jehovah's Witness Church, they'll talk about Jesus Christ. The Christian Church will talk about Jesus Christ. Aren't we all saying the same thing? Isn't God and Allah the same thing? Just different words to describe the same deity. Aren't we all on some same path to get us to the same place in the end? In our next segment, we'll give serious consideration to those questions. May God bless you.